Hello, Sunshine. I'm Alexi, Lalas, and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue-colored glasses. This week, we'll be talking U.S. men's national team and FIFA and Apple and MLS and Nations League and Mosse and Pogba and bad words and 2026 host cities and denim jerseys and so much more. But first, joining me, as always, my friend, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant and a Fox soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. Mosse, how are you doing on this Monday, June 20th in the year 2022?
I am doing well now. Is it still June 20th where you are?
It still is June 20th. You can hear, and if you're watching, you can see that we are again remote for this week's pod. Could not be helped. I come to you from the lovely city of Zurich, Switzerland. I am here for the week, taking classes and studying and continuing on this business program that I mentioned a few podcasts back that FIFA is running called the Next 90. And it's a group of, about 35 in the total group. Probably about 25 are actually here on site. It runs for a year. And this was one of the on-site requirements of two that are going to happen. The next one's going to happen probably in January. They were going to do it at the World Cup. That's probably not going to happen. But anyway, I come to you from Zurich, Switzerland. Beautiful Zurich, Switzerland. Expensive Zurich, Switzerland. But we're having a good time, and I'm going to talk more about it in my one for the road there. But it's fun. I am in my hotel room. I'm not in a theater or anything like that. And just because I'm over here doing what I'm doing doesn't mean we're not recording the podcast. But Mosse, you ever been to Switzerland? Ever been to Zurich?
No, I've never been.
Oh, all right. Well, I'll tell you all about FIFA in particular, because we were on the campus, and it's a campus. So did you watch anything, Mosse?
Not sure if I've mentioned this yet on the pod, but I did finish Severance. Loved it. I thought the season finale was one of the best season finales I've seen in a very long time. I also finished the final season of Peaky Blinders, although from what I read, there's going to be a movie, so the story is not over yet. And I finished the first season of The Offer, which is that Paramount Plus show about the making of The Godfather, which then sent me on this whole deep dive about early 70s cinema, which was such an incredible era. You had Godfather, Godfather Part 2, Serpico, Dog Day Afternoon, The Sting, Chinatown, French Connection, just an incredible era. So I've been kind of familiarizing myself with that period in cinematic history.
My wife has been talking to me about watching what's the one called about the Godfather, how it got made?
The Offer.
The Offer. She's been talking about watching it together. We do our viewing differently because we like different things, but this is kind of something that I think she wants to watch together, but she's very, very excited. The problem is that I don't trust her to stay on course. She'll blaze ahead and then she'll, reveal stuff to me. And so I trust my wife. I just don't trust her in this capacity for this particular thing. So I'm not sure. I'm definitely going to watch it because it's gotten some very good reviews and she's very excited to watch it too. And she, whatever you say, Mosse, is golden to her, and she's not alone.
I actually don't love the show, to be honest. Okay. I think it's just okay. So
okay.
I would temper your expectations.
Okay. I have two movies, both of them Jason Bateman movies. One called Bad Words, where he is a adult that ends up going into a spelling bee. And it's very dark, but still very, very funny. And then the second one, and this one I watched on the plane. I had a 10-hour-ish, 11-hour-ish flight from Los Angeles to Paris. I went through Paris to get to Zurich. And the entire way, I don't sleep on planes. And so I'm that one light in a dark plane, especially when it's yeah, I'm that guy. That's me. And so I'm watching. I don't turn my light on, but you know what I'm talking about. So I watched something called "This Is Where I Leave You." It came out in 2014, and it's an ensemble type of cast. Who a bunch of siblings whose father dies, and they come back, and hijinks ensue. It's been done in many other movies and big chillish type of stuff, but this is it was funny. He's so funny in everything that he does, and at times it's understated, but both of them were very, very good, and I recommend them highly. Anything else, Mosse, before we light this candle?
That's it.
All right. Are you ready to light this candle?
Let's do it.
Let's do it international style. from Zurich here. All right. Where should we dive into first, Mosse? What do you want to do here? Because we are in the summertime and the schedule has changed up around the world. And, we're going to reflect that in the things that we're talking about. So where do you want to start?
I think we want to put a ribbon on the June window for the U.S. national team. The world has not heard your thoughts yet on the El Salvador game, unless they were watching FS1 that night. But I mean, on the podcast, we haven't really dug into that game. So I think we're going to start there. The U.S. wrapping up this June window with a 1-1 draw away to El Salvador in the CONCACAF Nations League. This match played under terrible weather conditions. The pitch was a disaster. And, coming off a game against Grenada, in which we all agreed that the level of opposition was such that you couldn't glean too much from that game. And then people see the conditions for this game and they say, oh, another waste, another game where you're not going to be able to read too much into it because of these conditions. How can you judge a player on this field? But it just became such a drumbeat on Twitter about this being a meaningless game now because of the weather. And I think it offended your sensibilities at one point, and you had a bit of a rant on TV. And I think we can revisit that here.
Well, look, I completely sympathize with, whether it's fans or whether it's even part of myself. And certainly I would think Greg Berhalter, and I guess this team, that they have such limited opportunities to play together before the World Cup. We all know everything is focused on that. However, this is a tournament. And whether it's El Salvador or anybody else, as I said on television, they have absolutely no responsibility to prepare the United States for the World Cup. I, too, lament the fact that that's another 90 minutes that is not going to approximate in terms of the scenario and the situation and the opponent and the weather, for all intents and purposes, that we are going to see in Qatar. And so, especially for someone like Greg Berhalter, who has used the last 3-4 years to really establish a different way of playing, and a way of playing that is heavily reliant on the conditions being ideal. And this is, and so when I was talking on air, it was, I felt a sentiment out there that we shouldn't be made to play this game. And, that's just elitist bull. Okay. Would we have preferred to play not only in a different circumstance with a better field, but also against better competition? Yeah, of course we would. But we are a member part of CONCACAF, and this is a CONCACAF tournament, and this is an official tournament. And whether it's El Salvador looking ahead or anybody else, I think, and here's the other thing. As far as difficult environments to play on, we probably don't have a leg to stand on, given what we did in World Cup qualifying. So, when I think about this game, I don't think that it was a complete waste. All right. And actually, I think Greg Berhalter did a pretty good job. And yeah, there was some spin to it, but I think he did a really good job of saying, you know what, while it's not ideal, we can take something away. And the fight that team showed, I mean, not just figuratively, literally the fighting that was going on there, especially in the second half when some changes were made and Weston McKennie came in. I think that there is value to that, because this is still a young, inexperienced team, Mosse, that we've talked about and we have high hopes for, that certainly has gone through a blooding over the last couple of years. But this is also just a good reminder to this team that there will come a point, even in pristine environments and the ideal type of situation against better competition, there will come a point where all that fame, all that money, all that talent, all that other stuff doesn't mean, and you have to be able to get down and dirty. And that game the other day was a bar fight. And, I said on air that while there are players on the field that couldn't even get into a bar because of their age, they scrapped. And that's a good trait. And so all in all, I thought they took lemons and made some lemonade. And that's important. Would we all have liked to have seen them play somebody else? And was this, I'm not reading into individual players and what they did. I'm happy that Jordan Morris scored. I don't know if that gets him on the plane. I think he's on the cusp, but I will read in totality into how the result came and how the 1-1 result came in that difficult environment on the field. But yeah, I mean, I'll let you respond to that. Were you as put out as I was by this sentiment out there?
No, I have some sympathy for the point of view that, like I said, you're coming off already a game against Grenada that we all dismissed because of the level of opposition. And then you see the weather, the pitch conditions that night, and you think, oh, this is going to be another game that we're not going to be able to read that much into. But I also agree with you that the game ended up unfolding in such a way where, from an intangible standpoint, I think the U.S. can take something out of it in terms of building team spirit and mental toughness, fighting through adversity and all that stuff. So in the end, I think everybody landed on the fact that there was some good stuff to be taken out of it.
Did you think the El Salvador goal was a cross or a shot?
I think it was a cross.
For those that don't know, the ball went out wide, and the left foot, and this, I mean, he's pinged it in, and it looked like a cross. It looked like a shot. I thought it was a shot. I think there was intent in the way that he set up. And if you watched, and by the way, it caught Horvath. That's goalkeepers. I'm okay every once in a while with that happening. I like goalkeepers to cheat the cross, but he was frozen in that moment. And he knew the minute it left his foot that he was going to be in trouble.
If that's a shot, then Ronaldinho's free kick against England in 2002 is a shot as well.
Here we go.
Here we go. My biggest overall takeaway of this June window, if we can get into the players, is that while we all framed it as if the starting center forward position is completely up for grabs and we're still searching for a starting center forward, Greg Berhalter is not on that page at all. I think Jesus Ferreira, in his mind, is way ahead of the pack. If nothing crazy happens the next few months, he's going to be your starting center forward in Qatar. Everything about the way Greg Berhalter managed these games. And he's not the only manager to do this, to try to reverse engineer the outcome that you want. If you look at the amount of minutes that Ferreira and Haji Wright played and who they were on the field against, it was kind of all set up for Ferreira to outshine Haji Wright. And that's exactly what happened. And so I think what's really up for grabs is that other center forward spot on the roster, because in a 26-man roster, there's going to be another center forward on it. And Haji Wright, I don't think helped himself too much, particularly if you listen to Berhalter's comments after the El Salvador game. So in that sense, that spot is still wide open, and we could see a Ricardo Pepi or even somebody else like a Brandon Vasquez find his way onto the plane to Qatar. But I don't think there's much debate anymore about who the starting center forward is right now. I mean, what did you make of those Berhalter comments? I know Herculez Gomez and others had an issue with it. I did find it to be a bit harsh. The kid is making his first start in those conditions. You gave him 45 minutes. You yanked him. The rest of the team struggled too in the first half. Who knows? Maybe if he had stayed on the field, he could have improved along with the rest of the team. And if that's it for Haji Wright, he doesn't get picked in September for the World Cup. I don't know. I think that's a little bit harsh. But I mean, how did you interpret the whole thing?
Mosse, the U.S. men's national team is not a charity, okay? And is it fair? Again, soccer isn't fair and life isn't fair. And in this instant, every single player at some point has been given an opportunity. It might be a sliver of an opportunity, but you have to be able to take. Does it mean you're never going to get another opportunity? Not necessarily, but it also doesn't preclude the fact that that might be your window. And those that do take it can go on. And some very, very good players in that moment might not take it. And they might never be national team players. Was it ideal? No, we've already established it wasn't ideal. But also Greg Berhalter, while he certainly, and rightfully so, is looking to use these games in preparation for the World Cup, he still has a game to win. And at that point, you're losing. At that point, it had not gone well for the U.S. And I think he coached that game, aside from the starting lineup that didn't include Weston McKennie. But even then, I mean, when we talked to Greg Berhalter, he says if you're not fit and 100% and ready to go, he's got some options out there. But I think he coached that game the way he would have coached a World Cup game, in that they're losing and they have to find a way to be better. And you cannot, you can't be romantic in that moment. You have to be ruthless in that moment. And so I think for a lot of people, it looked ruthless But I like it. I like the fact that he said, no, this is not happening. I need to make the changes in order to give my team the best possible chance of coming back, scoring a goal, and getting a point on the road in El Salvador, which even in regular circumstances isn't the easiest thing to do.
My other big takeaway is that going into this window, in their desire to get Aronson or Gio Reyna in the starting lineup, there were some people leaving Yunus Musa off of their 11s. And after particularly that El Salvador game, that seems to be over. Everybody was so impressed with his play and felt like his ball progression is so valuable to this team that now there's a sense that midfield three is locked in. Barring injury, it's going to be Adams, McKinney, and Musa. And if we think Ferreira is the starting number 9 and you've got Pulisic, that means Timmy Weah, Aronson, and Reyna all fighting for one spot. Or I guess Aronson is now in the midfield mix. So you could put him over there as a backup to McKinney or Musa. And then Reyna and Timmy Weah fighting for that other spot. However you choose to look at it, I think 2 of the 3 of Timmy Weah, Gio Reyna, and Brendan Aronson, when the U.S. takes the field against Wales on November 21st, are going to be on the bench, which is kind of interesting.
It's happening the way that we have thought it would, but it's also happening. It was really interesting. I mean, that Greg Berhalter hears the talks of, either a Weah playing in the middle in that front 3 or a Gio Reyna playing in the middle of that front 3. And I think he's gone out of his way to really establish that Jesus Ferreira, I think, is his guy. And I think we have to come to terms with that. It seems that Greg and this team to a certain extent has come to terms. And I'm not saying we've talked about Jesus Ferreira, the work that he does beyond actually scoring the goals, which we know is his prime responsibility. But if that is the case, I've given you my best 11, and I've talked about having those 3 interchanged and Weah going in order to get Aronson on the field. But if the case is that the U.S. is going to play with Jesus Ferreira in that 9 position, false 9, whatever you want to call it, then the reality is that I can't get Aronson and Gio Reyna on the field in that type of scenario. And so I'm going to have to make some real difficult decisions. These are, again, champagne problems. We always talk about that, and maybe for the first time. And it fosters real debate. And there, to your point, are on this side. Now, to those people that think that Musa shouldn't be there, I mean, you're not watching the game. Okay, you're not watching, even at this young age, how important he is. And I like consistency. Okay, and I know the shiny new thing and tinkering is attractive at times, but I like the fact that those 3 have played so many times together in a way that we can depend on that. Now it's relative to injuries, and so it's nice to have other options over there. When I look at locks for this team, we talked a little bit about some of the people that are going, and it is the usual suspects. We understand that, and so the only thing, if we were talking about people on the fringe or on the border, you mentioned up top with number 9, there still could be somebody that comes along, and that's dark horse type of stuff. I mentioned Jordan Morris, who I do think's on the bubble. I think Christian Roldan's going to get on the plane. Keep in mind, we're probably talking about a 26-man roster. It makes it a little bit easier. I don't think that they're going to be jaw to the floor when that announcement happens types of reaction when it comes ultimately to the players on the plane. Luca De La Torre again came on and impressed. There's somebody that has used his time every single time he has gotten it to his advantage, and his cachet and his likability, to even to the extent where people are trying to find a way to get him in their starting 11. So, I mean, the starting 11 for this U.S. men's national team, and by the way, we're all the premise that we're all kind of operating under is that Gio Reyna is going to be healthy. Well, we know that just has not proven to be true. I'm knocking on wood that he is, which it gives us another person to possibly go in there. But again, if you're not around, it's hard to just automatically put you into the 11, which a lot of people still are doing with Gio Reyna. And I get it. He's incredibly talented, but until he proves that he has a consistency of staying healthy and delivering for this team, I think it's going to be hard to start him, at least for me. What else, Mosse?
In goal, I do think Sean Johnson's performance against Uruguay, coupled with that Horvath mistake that we just discussed, means Sean Johnson leapfrogged him in the depth chart. I would say the top three right now are Turner, Steffen, and Johnson. Do you agree?
Yeah. 100%. And we're only taking 3 goalkeepers. I think those, barring injury, again, knocking on wood, I think those are the 3 that are going to go. I think, Walker Zimmerman's going to go. I think Walker Zimmerman, Chris Richards, and Aaron Long are locks. And I do think if the World Cup were to happen today, that it would be Walker Zimmerman and Aaron Long. But Chris Richards, hopefully he gets back in and he pushes, because I think he can have a say when ultimately things, I think Dest is going. Jedi Robinson is going. We mentioned the 3. Luca Della Torre. I think someone like Christian Roldan is going to go because he can play multiple positions. They talk about how important he is to the spirit of that team and to that locker room. And then I don't know, any other ones to stand out to you that you think are on bubbles right now?
I thought it was really interesting when we spoke to Berhalter before the El Salvador game, and we just asked him a very general question about what he's looking to get out of this game. And sort of unprompted, he started talking about what a question mark the backup left back spot is. Mm-hmm. Did you notice that? So so that is a genuine concern there. George Bello, Joe Scally, none of them impressed in this window. So yeah, I think, obviously Anthony Robinson locked in as a starter, but that other left back is way up in the air.
I mean, his wheels are turning, Greg Berhalter, and he's saying, what if Robinson goes down? Now we put Dest out there, and so, but that creates a problem at right back. So who is going to be that right back if Dest flips over to the left side? So, and look, Anthony Robinson is good. I'm still a little wary because he still has those moments, but he's the best thing that we have going on that left-hand side. And to his credit, he's actually been really consistent. And I think he's the starter. I mean, I'm not going out on a limb saying that. Should the World Cup, if it were to start today. One more thing, just before we go, and it was, we talked about the field, and yeah, it was horrible, and it was very difficult to play on, and it was heavy. But there also was an element of me that looked at these guys, not just embrace the moment, but embrace the opportunity. And I mean, we talk about them as young players. Well, I thought that we actually saw the kids in them come out. And this can happen whatever age you are. The sliding around and getting all muddy and doing all that kind of stuff. You saw it happen in real time, the change of mentality that happened. And, just to finish it off in terms of, some with the reaction out there, I remember many years ago in Copa America back in the 1900s playing for the national team. And I remember that we were training in a place called Paysandú, Uruguay. Okay. Little town that none of us would ever have gone to had it not been for Copa America. And they embraced us as the team that had chosen to train every day there. And it was wonderful. The people of Paysandú, like I said, we became their team. We were training on a field that was horrible. And there was a point I remember where Steve Sampson said, "Hey, we got to figure out what we're going to do." And I remember having a conversation with him and with other players saying, "Listen, that's not the message that we need to send. We'll figure it out. Is it ideal? No, it's not ideal, but that's not the message that we need to send." And look, it plays into stereotypes. It plays into, ugly American stereotypes. And as I said, entitled type of actions, and we have to be good members. Now, I'm not saying put anybody in danger, okay? And players the lightning wasn't going on. There weren't puddles on the field. Was it heavy? Yes. Did it make it difficult to play the way the U.S. wanted to? Yes. But again, I looked at it as, when did we get so snobby and elitist and on our high horse about playing a game in El Salvador?
So you weren't concerned about injury because there were some people in the first half that get Pulisic off at the half because this is too risky. That didn't cross your mind. I don't understand. What's the risk? I mean, he's playing because he's playing on soft grass. I mean, what if it was raining? I mean, we could put these guys in bubble wrap if you want until the World Cup and be done with it. And we won't see them and pull them out. But that's not, we got horses. And I'm not saying do stupid stuff out there, but I don't see the risk. You're more apt to get injured when it's wet and soggy on a field, I don't know, than when it's really hot.
or really cold, or I don't know. It's I just didn't see the logic out there. I think it was much more relative to the fact that a lot of people saw the game as meaningless, and therefore, whether it had been played in pristine conditions or not, I think a lot of people were saying, what if our player gets hurt out here? Why are we playing him in this game? I don't think it all had to do relative to the specific field conditions, but I did see that, to your point, and again, Twitter is Twitter. And I know I say it's not a focus group and it's an echo chamber and all that kind of stuff, but what are we doing? We're using it as a focus group here because it is an incredible content generator when it comes to the work that we do. Anything else, Mosse, on this?
No, but there is some news involving another CONCACAF team. The World Cup field is complete. Congratulations to Costa Rica. They snatched the last spot. They beat New Zealand 1-0 in the Intercontinental Playoff. Joel Campbell with an early goal, and then they held on. New Zealand was the better team, but Costa Rica defended pretty well. Keylor Navas made a couple of big saves. And I have to say, we talked about this off the air, but when we watched this Costa Rica team at the Gold Cup and then in the early part of the octagonal, I thought, no way. I mean, they just looked old and stale. And the way they came on in the second half of the octagonal was very impressive. They surged past Panama into that top four, almost pipped the U.S. for third and qualify directly. Instead, they had to go to the playoff, but then they get the result they needed. So they're off to their third straight World Cup and fifth in the last 6 tournaments. So very impressive achievement for Costa Rica.
Very impressive. And to your point, I mean, there was a time when I remember at the beginning of the octagonal, I remember talking to you, and we were. It was about Honduras at that point, because actually Honduras was playing much better. And if you had told me in that moment that this version of Costa Rica was going to qualify for the World Cup, I would have laughed in your face. And you make some changes on and off the field, and you're still Costa Rica. And and when it got to this one-off playoff game, I think they figured it out. Now they bent plenty. They just didn't ultimately break. And from a CONCACAF perspective, it goes back to, being good citizens of CONCACAF. I'm happy. I'm happy that there's another CONCACAF team in. It's good for the region. It's good for the Confederation. It's good for Costa Rica. And to your point, they continue to be able to do this. And the pride that they feel and the attention that they get, rightfully so, for doing this is going to be on display once again. So congratulations to the Tigos.
And with Peru losing the other playoff, the same number of CONCACAF teams as there are from CONMEBOL, 4 each in this World Cup, which is interesting.
I'm sure they're happy about that.
One more note. We mentioned last week the CONCACAF Under-20 Championship was firing up. The U.S. played its first game in that. They beat St. Kitts and Nevis 10-0. And we're taping this on a Monday afternoon. In a couple hours, the U.S. plays Canada in their second group game. So curious to see how that goes. Remember, the top 4 in this tournament qualify for the Under-20 World Cup next year. And then the top 2 qualify for the 2024 Olympics in Paris. So this is definitely a tournament that everybody's keeping an eye on. And so, like I said, U.S.-Canada later today. By the time you hear this podcast, that game will have already taken place.
Did everybody complain about the St. Nevis result and how useless and irresponsible it was to even play anybody?
It had a U.S. women against Thailand feel to it. So I was comparing the celebrations to see if
it's not their fault. Take it. Keep scoring. Score and keep scoring. All right. Anything else? We'll put this international window to bed.
That's it for this opening segment.
Okay, we'll take a quick break here. When we come back, we'll take a trip around Europe. There's still all sorts of stuff going on. We finish up with some Nations League action and some other stuff that's going on. Don't go away. All right, we're back. Mosse, Nations League, this was a really interesting window. And from a selfish perspective, I know we've talked about it, getting prepared for the World Cup. It was fun to see a lot of these teams play in competitive environments. There actually was, there was a lot of, the psyche that we're talking about with the U.S. team with this Nations League when we saw Qatar-bound teams playing in a competitive environment, needing obviously results, but also looking at a bigger picture and a much bigger event coming later on down the line. But ultimately, I thought the crowds were great. I thought the action was great. There was plenty of drama and interesting results out there. Big picture takeaways in this window?
England 0, Hungary 4, worst home loss since 1928. Your thoughts? We covered Germany Italy that day, but Warren Barton was on the desk and watching the England game as well. And so I got his live reactions to that result. Every time there was a Hungary goal scored, I could hear groans in my headset. What did you make of that one?
I mean, I talked last week about how I there's obviously a part of me, and never would I let an opportunity to laugh at England go. And so, yes, I giggled along with others at their downfall and their historic collapse and failure. But then there's the other part of me that doesn't want it happening right now, because they still have time to get it right. And they're still a very good team, and they still could go out and kick our ass in the World Cup, despite what is happening. Having said that, I do think that there is a contingent that thinks this leadership with Southgate has run its course. I think that there's a general level of respect and thanks for what he has done, in the World Cup, and then obviously in Euros. But I think that there's also a sentiment that he's taken it as far as it can go. I still don't think he's getting fired, but it's not rumblings anymore. There are people that are outright saying this is not good enough. And obviously the results are not good enough. And I'm not just talking about people chirping, because there is obviously something afoot and something wrong. And I just want it to be wrong and, and problematic at the most important moment, which is against the US on November 21st, Black Friday. Be there, watch it on Big Fox.
So big picture, we're through 4 match days. There'll be 2 more in September. Right now, the group leaders in League A are Denmark, Hungary, Spain, and the Netherlands. So if it ended today, that would be your final 4. Hungary reminds me a little bit of Costa Rica at the 2014 World Cup. They're in a group with Germany, Italy, and England, and they're somehow the ones in first place. So it just shows you that you never know sometimes. But we'll see. The Spain-Portugal group is interesting. They still have to play in Portugal, so that match is probably going to decide it. I continue to be impressed by Denmark, and France and England already eliminated in their respective groups from the Final Four. They're just trying to not get relegated at this point. So, yeah, I mean, we'll resume our coverage in September, and there's still a lot to be decided.
I think you have pretty much rightfully anointed Denmark as your dark horse, right? I mean, from a World Cup perspective. I'm even talking like winning the World Cup. I mean, if that were to happen, that's how good this team is. And I'm not saying that it's completely under the radar, but I think that will be a solid choice inevitably when that question comes to all of us. Who's your dark horse? And because that one conceivably could happen. All right. And it would be interesting. It'll be interesting to see ultimately when the World Cup comes around what the odds are on Denmark going all the way. But I still think you're going to win some money. You mentioned teams like France and teams like England and teams like Belgium, and those that that showed as elite as they are and as wonderful as they are, they're struggling right now. What has you excited the most, and what has you worried the most in terms of what you saw? I mean, are you more worried about England, or are you more worried about France or Belgium, or who?
I mean, Belgium was very Jekyll and Hyde. I'm not sure what to make of that team. I still stand by my initial diagnosis that, you've got 2 of the big 3, Lukaku and Hazard, suffering through a difficult time at club level. We'll talk about Lukaku in a minute when we do transfer market. And so, I'm wondering about that team a little bit, but they showed, at least in that Poland game, that on their day, they can still be very impressive. Not worried about France, to be honest. I think there's too much talent. They'll get it together, and when the World Cup rolls around, they'll be very good. I do wonder about England. I wonder if there's something to the fact that it's Southgate. I don't know. He might have lost his way a little bit there, but I know you don't want to hear that.
No, man. I hope that he continues to lose his way. So from your lips to God's ears, and I hope it continues. How about the curious case of Germany? Because I am becoming more and more convinced that, talk about putting money. I know it's Germany, right? But I got a good mind to put money on Germany winning it. I mean, they're not great, but they still got something, and obviously they're still Germany.
Yeah, in the game we did, like I said, the same day as the England-Hungary match, we were actually doing Germany, Italy, and Germany won 5-2. it's funny about Italy. They did some good stuff. They played 5 games in this window, and in the middle 3, there was some good things they can take out of it. But man, it was bracketed by 2 very humbling: the 3-0 defeat to Argentina in the Finalissima, and then this 5-2 loss to Germany. And yeah, I thought Germany looked very explosive going forward. Yeah, I mean, that collection of Muller and Gnabry and Leroy Sané and Werner and Havertz. There's a lot of talent there. I like Hansi Flick as a manager. So, and you know, their odds are not that I think those are pretty good odds if you take Germany to win this World Cup. So I'm with you. I'm high on this team. I think they're one of my real contenders to win it. So yeah, that's definitely one of my takeaways coming out of this window.
All right. Shall we move on to some transfer news?
Yeah. So we talked last week about Liverpool signing Darwin Nunez. And there was a thought that would have a domino effect of allowing Sadio Mane to go to Bayern and then Robert Lewandowski to go to Barcelona, where one of those did happen. Sadio Mane, it is official. He's off to Bayern Munich. It's like 30-something million euros base fee. And then with bonuses, could end up being around 40 million euros. The reaction's been interesting. There are some Premier League folk that are scratching their heads at why Sadio Mane would want to make this move at this point in his career. It's a lot of that. Why leave the Premier League to go to the Bundesliga? And what's the challenge there? Bayern win it every year anyway. It's a step down to go from England to Germany, which again, my take on it is I think top players, they care much more about the Champions League than they do whatever domestic league they play in. And there's no better example of that than PSG. You know, you can mock PSG for not winning the Champions League. You can question their approach. But the one thing you can't question is their ability to sign top players. I mean, there's 10 years worth of empirical evidence now that top players will go there. And yet whenever a top player is available and PSG are interested, you still hear some people say, well, he'll never go there because he doesn't want to play in that league. And it doesn't matter. The money talks louder, and it's Paris. And the one good thing about playing in that league is you're guaranteed to be in the Champions League every season because PSG are never not going to qualify. There's 3 teams that have been in the knockout stage of the Champions League each of the last 10 seasons: Bayern, Real Madrid, and PSG. So there's something to be said for that guarantee to be playing at the highest level of that competition. And to go back to Sadio Mane, it is Bayern. And so I don't know why people in England are that shocked, but some are. I mean, how does that hit you, Sadio Mane wanting to leave Liverpool to go to Bayern Munich?
Well, I'll tell you exactly why they're like that. It's because they have blinders on and they are delusional at times about their league and their country and culture. And I understand it. I mean, it's the most popular league in the world. And so a natural type of reaction for anybody, including the English, would be, well, why is this player doing this? I think we try to put ourselves in their shoes. And maybe when we do that, we can't fathom that anybody would make a decision like that. But, you know, it just might be that he's just not that into you, when it comes to England. I mean, he might want a different adventure. He might want a different culture. He might be tired of the culture that is the EPL and the culture that is England, especially relative to the EPL. And we know that, the German culture and the Bundesliga is also very, very different. But, to your point, it's not like I don't see this as a step down.
I mean, do you sense that a guy that's playing for Bayern or PSG is less relevant than a guy who's playing for one of the big English clubs? I hear that argument a lot. Do you think there's something to that?
Oh, yeah.
Just week in, week out, he's less in your consciousness than he would be if he's playing for a Liverpool or Manchester City.
100%. Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, look,
okay.
I know there are the super clubs out there, and we know those players on that super club, but there is absolutely, like I said, blinders and bias when it comes to the way that EPL players are viewed. And look, over here, obviously it's a very popular league. The EPL, English, lends itself to being popular. And when I look at the EPL, I get why these players are looked at times. And we talk about it before. Sometimes they're overvalued, and the esteem that we have is impacted by just the perception of the EPL. So look, I wish him well. It'll be interesting to see what type of player he is in, a different type of system and what type of role he has there. And nothing lasts forever. And it'll be up to Liverpool to try to figure out how to replace it. You mentioned Nunez. Give people, if you can, a comp. I'm trying to think of someone in terms, because not everybody will have seen him play. And again, to your point, Mosse, now that stage where he is going, and not just the team, but the league in which he's going, it's a whole nother level of awareness and scrutiny because of the size and the popularity of the EPL.
He's a big, strong, physical striker in the Erling Haaland mold, but I think a poor man's version of Haaland, not as talented. So yeah, I mean, I think it's somebody like that, which is interesting because as City and Liverpool are now adding that type of player that they didn't have before. Chelsea tried that a season ago with Lukaku and failed miserably. And now Lukaku is dead set on going back to Inter. And it looks like the latest reports is the two clubs are going to agree on a loan deal. So Romelu Lukaku is going to go back to Inter Milan. Inter, by the way, also trying to sign Paulo Dybala. So they could have a Dybala, Lautaro Martinez, Lukaku attack next season, which would be pretty tasty as they try to wrestle the title back from AC Milan. Chelsea being linked heavily now with Raheem Sterling, which that would have some Christian Pulisic implications. So worth keeping an eye on that. And then another transfer that could impact an American is it does sound like Paul Pogba is going to go to Juventus, which potentially impacts Weston McKennie. We'll keep an eye on that. Juventus also interested in Angel Di Maria, who is a free agent. Barcelona have been mentioned with him as well. Again, I mentioned this last week and you sort of teased me about it, but I still get a kick out of Barcelona being linked with so many players when they, from what you read, they don't have any money. Remember, there's a TV show Louis years ago with Louis C.K.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
And there's an episode where he just decides he wants to buy this like $14 million house, and he goes to meet with his accountant, and his accountant's like, Louis, this house costs $14 million. You have $20,000 to your name. So that's not going to work. So we'll see what Barcelona can actually get done when it comes to Lewandowski or Rafinha or Di Maria or Bernardo Silva they've been mentioned with, or Koundé or Koulibaly at the back. I don't know, but I mean they're talking a big game like they're going to sign some of these players I just mentioned. So we'll keep an eye on that. But yeah, I mean that's where we are in the transfer market. I don't know.
Prediction before we go. Prediction on what Paul Pogba is in this return to Italy to Juventus. Is he rejuvenated? I mean, it is a return to form for him?
Yeah, I think he'll play well. I think escaping Manchester United will be good for him and put him back at Juventus and he'll play. And
he'll play. So well. He'll ride off into the World Cup sunset there on a high. Okay.
Yep.
That's the rich get richer over there with France. All right. Anything else, Mosse?
That is it.
All right. Let's take another break. When we come back, we'll hit you up with some Ask Alexi. Don't go anywhere. All right, we're back, and it's time for Ask Alexi, that point in the show where you send us your questions or you call our State of the Union podcast hotline, which is, by the way, 657-549-2297. That's 657-549-2297. Or you send it on the social media platforms out there using that hashtag Ask Alexi, as some people did this week. What do we got this week, Mosse?
We're going to leave with a question. One could argue that we should have led the podcast with this topic, but yeah. I didn't mind Luis putting it down here because I always like adding substance to the Ask Alexi segment. So
wow.
At PS Broderick asks, where do you think the 2026 World Cup final should be held? So that leads into our conversation about the venue announcement, which we were both in New York to cover. Well, I don't know if you want to answer the question first or go through the overall what cities.
Okay. So first off, let's set the scene for what happened last week when we went to New York. So obviously World Cup in 2026 is coming predominantly to the United States, but we're doing it with our friends to the north in Canada and our friends to south in Mexico. And this was the announcement of where the actual cities are going to be come 2026. And it's always interesting because it's a competition within a competition. And there's drama and there's, intrigue that goes on backstage. This was a FIFA production. Obviously, from a Fox perspective, we were there with our talent, myself and Rob Stone and Jenny Taft and Stu. But also it was a partnership with the rights broadcasters in Fox, with FIFA and with Telemundo, right?
The great Anna Jerka.
Anna Jurka and the great Andreas Cantor were there. So this was a coming together of a lot of, kind of very strong and strong-willed type of organizations to be kumbaya and to make it something that ultimately, from a FIFA perspective, they were comfortable with. And so, it was interesting the way the show was formulated and how we did it. It ended up being fine, and I think it was entertaining. But I think each one of those entities, had they done it on their own, would have probably done it in a different way. But it was a partnership, and we worked together, and we put together a show. I'm not, to your point, I'm not burying the lead here or anything. The venues are in the United States, New York, New Jersey. And when I say New York, New Jersey, I mean New Jersey, Philadelphia, Boston, Atlanta, Miami, Houston, Dallas, Kansas City, Seattle, San Francisco, and LA SoFi Stadium. Canada had 3 potential cities that included Edmonton. Edmonton's out, just Vancouver and Toronto. Mexico had 3 cities, got 3 cities: Mexico City, Guadalajara, and Monterrey. I think the talking points were the fact that DC didn't get a nod. And when I say DC, it was really Baltimore. And so Baltimore is obviously not DC. And by the way, even DC is not DC in what they had going on. And they were warned, and there was that last minute joint venture with Baltimore, and that certainly didn't help them. The other one that was not only, part of the, oh, wow, but I think there was a real kind of sadness that it didn't happen, was Nashville, for what Nashville is. But it's their own fault. They had to do, evidently, a lot of improvements to the tune of $100 million, whatever it ends up being. And they said, well, why are we going to do that? We're just going to build a new stadium. That's all fine and well, except it's not going to be ready till after the World Cup. And so they miss out through fault of their own. Because I think it was a lock for them to have it. So that's a pity. And it should keep in mind, we reminded everybody on the broadcast that plenty of these cities are still soccer cities, and they're still going to have World Cup involvement. The DC mayor was talking about, the fan fest on the mall and doing all that. But, it's still, it's not a hit that any city wants to take. Let's see what else. I think overall, and we mentioned it on the broadcast, the inclusion of Cascadia just shows how much that area means to soccer. And let's be honest, it has for decades. But the fact that Seattle is involved is a no-brainer, and I think it's going to be a wonderful venue for the 26th World Cup. Kansas City involved. That's interesting from a Midwestern perspective, and that template, or that the map that we've seen. Cities that were involved in '94 that are not involved anymore, and that does include DC, also Orlando. And times have changed. I think the biggest news for me is the fact that we have multiple stadiums that are roofed, that are indoors. We are going to have indoor Men's World Cup games for the first time since 1994 and the Pontiac Silverdome. Rest in peace, Pontiac Silverdome. It's going to be very, very different. I think that it's going to become such a big part of the World Cup that Atlanta has a shout for the semifinal. And I think that there's a good chance that the final is played ultimately indoors at Jerry World down there in Dallas. You eliminate the problem when it comes to the weather. Obviously, ideal and pristine conditions for your most high-profile game, the World Cup final. And the time zone helps, because we remember that both the 1994 World Cup and the 1999 World Cup, the finals were held in Los Angeles at the Rose Bowl. I'm not saying SoFi isn't there, but that time zone really hampers in terms of getting that prime European market unless you start very, very early in the day. What stood out to you, my friend?
Well, on DC, it's only the third World Cup in which the capital of the primary host will not stage games. So I mean, obviously Ottawa didn't get it as well, but Canada only had 2 cities, so that's not that big a deal. So yeah, they were apparently pretty stunned and disappointed there, but and that's the way it goes. FedEx Field got very low marks when FIFA did their inspection. Same thing for Nissan Stadium, which, as you mentioned, is what ended up sinking Nashville. I do think it's funny, this disconnect where we have all these beautiful new soccer specific stadiums being built, but it's sort of following that English model of smaller bandbox type stadiums, 20 something thousand people. And we all look at MLS teams playing in those venues rather than the big football stadiums as a sign of progress and the growth of soccer in this country. But then when it comes time for the World Cup, because FIFA has this minimum requirement of 40,000, then those venues all get shunted to the side, and we're back to the football stadium. So, I mean, the venues you mentioned the cities, but New York / New Jersey, it's MetLife, Philadelphia, Lincoln Financial Field, Boston, Gillette, Atlanta, Mercedes-Benz, Miami, Hard Rock, Houston, NRG Stadium, Dallas, AT&T, Kansas City, it's Arrowhead, Seattle, Lumen Field, San Francisco, Levi, LA, SoFi, Canada, BC Place, Toronto, BMO Field, which they're expanding it to fit because it's only 30,000 now, but it's going to be over 40,000. And this was no issue in Mexico because the stadiums are bigger there. Obviously, Azteca, Mexico City, Estadio Akron in Guadalajara, which is where Chivas plays, BBVA Stadium in Monterrey, where Monterrey plays. So, we're back to these big sort of stadiums. And so I find that to be kind of an interesting dynamic. No stadium in Ohio. I mean, for the past 20 years, that's been sort of the unofficial home of the U.S. national team. You think of all the big qualifiers. And yet, again, when it comes time for a World Cup, I mean, the dynamic shifts, and we're talking more about these big cities, New York, L.A., Boston, they're going to get the nod,
I will say that having experienced that show and that moment, and all the promo that we did, I was on like Fox and Friends and Kennedy and a lot of obviously Fox shows because they're promoting it. But I got a real sense that people that don't necessarily follow soccer, this was their wake up call and reminder that this is coming in 2026, and the positive vibes and the nostalgia, to be quite honest with you, about 1994 and 1999, and it's coming back. It was palpable. I mean, I talked to a lot of people that were really genuinely excited by this news, and not whether their city won or not, or whether they were part of that. More so the fact that this, again, they needed to be reminded that this is actually happening, and it's going to be awesome. Mosse. It is going to be a World Cup, the likes of which we have never seen in terms of scope, in terms of size, in terms of revenue, all of those different things. And it's coming back to, as we've said many, many times, an American soccer landscape that has dramatically changed from back in 1994 and 1999. And I cannot wait for it to happen. Obviously, we got a big one coming in November and December, but I think this really injected and excited a lot of people for 2026.
I do want to revisit the New York, New Jersey for a second, because I get such a kick out of it being from New York. It's a very sore spot for people in New Jersey that they're the New York Giants and the New York Jets, even though the stadium is in New Jersey. I remember when the Giants beat the Patriots, the second of those Super Bowls in which they beat the Patriots with Eli Manning. The parade was going to be in New York. Chris Christie, who's governor of New Jersey at the time, to kind of pander to his constituents, made a big stink about it. The parade should be in New Jersey. They're a New Jersey team. Let's stop this nonsense. So they ended up having 2 different parades to appease everybody. And it was just so funny. Every time I heard it when we're covering this event, the New York, New Jersey thing, I chuckled because that's FIFA trying to be politically correct. They like the idea of New York being attached to this event, but they also don't want to offend folks in New Jersey. So we kept referring to it as if it was one place, New York / New Jersey.
I mean, it's a story as old as time. We understand why people want to be called New York. And from a branding perspective and business perspective, it makes sense. I get it. But, the problem is that this is a completely different state. Because if you look at most of these stadiums, they're actually not in the city that they are called, that they are in. And that's okay. That's fine. I think we all accept it. But this is literally in a different state. And by the way, a state that in and of itself is pretty high profile, even though, they're looked at as, the redheaded stepchild. And I can say that, so don't scream and yell or send me letters or try to cancel me over there, because I actually am a redheaded stepchild there. But that's the way New Jersey relative to New York is often looked. So I get that. I understand. What else, Mosse?
By the way, one of the good things about being back in New York is I got to see my parents. But my mother has chosen this moment when I'm taping this podcast to text me all the photos she took of us throughout the couple of days I spent with them. So it's a bit distracting, but I'm going to try to fight my way through it.
You got to power through it, my man.
Yep. All right. Ready to move on to the next question?
Yeah. Next question.
At Ogie Oglethorpe.
Dude, it's Ogie Oglethorpe. All right. Have you ever seen Slapshot? Jesus. All right.
Ogie Oglethorpe. Asks Alexi, what are your thoughts about the Apple TV deal? Alluding to the deal Apple TV struck for the MLS rights. Obviously, to acknowledge the elephant in the room, we had a dog in this fight. We were following the situation closely. We've been covering MLS the past several years, so we're very curious to see what happens with all this. But we'll put that to the side. I mean, yes, we're both out of a job at the end of this year. I mean, that's not great, but nevertheless, we can discuss this Apple TV deal.
Sure, of course we can. I mean, we've talked about it before, and I mean, look, it is a fascinating story with all sorts of twists and turns, and that it finally lands on this. Actually, I don't think is necessarily a surprise. The amount of money is significant, and it's a significant bump. As you said, $2.5 billion over the next 10 years. Now, keep in mind that this, like I said, represents a significant increase in terms of the rights fee. Although Don Garber went out of his way to say that this isn't necessarily a rights fee. It ultimately doesn't really matter what you call it. It's about how much money you're getting. But he really wanted to drive home the fact that this was a partnership. Now, when it comes to Apple, I mean, this is blue chip type of stuff. This is the cachet that Apple brings because of the success and of a long history of quality. There is incredible value to Major League Soccer aligning itself with this. It also, in doing so, positions itself in this, it is a historic type of deal, as progressive and advanced and growing and young and hip and all of those different things. And that is important, especially when you are going out there and talking to sponsors or potential sponsors out there. And so this is a powerful ally to have in your corner. This is a partner who is going to, I think, recognize that this is their first of what is going to be other forays into sports in this magnitude and this type of structure. But they're going to leverage all of their their marketing, and I think that the attention that they get. So, and that's a good thing. To your point about Fox, and we've talked about this before, in that I love this league. It is La Cosa Nostra, warts and all. It's not perfect, and I, as the kids say, stand for it. You can call me a shill and do all that, but I will defend it. And as I said, it's not perfect, and I'll call it out when it isn't. But I had a wonderful time being part of this league in a professional sense from our broadcasts of it. They could continue because there is a linear part of, or a potential linear part of a broadcasting deal going forward. And this is where it gets interesting in terms of that moving forward. You have your MLS fans. And part of the problem with Major League Soccer, as we said time and time again, isn't that there aren't soccer fans in the United States. It's that there's not enough MLS fans. And by the way, this is global, so that I'm talking around the world. So you still have your MLS fans, whatever, give it a number. All right. And so now MLS, from an MLS fan perspective, this is great. Get to see every single game. It's one-stop shopping. It will be housed in its own specific MLS streaming service within the Apple app. There will certainly be, and that's where you can get every single game. Then there'll be certain games that appear actually on the Apple app that are quote unquote free. And if you are a season ticket holder, you are going to get a subscription. A free subscription with that. So all of these things are good. You'll be able to listen to audio from your local broadcast. So there's an element of, I guess, connection and humanity from a local and regional perspective that's not going to go away. The questions that you have are, this is a lot of content that is now being brought in-house to be produced by Major League Soccer. And they've planned for this for a number of years, having all of the local broadcasts end in 2022 so they could put it all together and sell it like this in a huge package. But they have to be able to crank out the content, and hopefully in a valuable and entertaining way. And the quality has to be there. And I think that it will initially. Who knows? Because this is happening starting in 2023. We still don't know when it comes to the linear part what's going to happen, because I think Don Garver would be the first person to say that a linear broadcast deal, that's what Fox would be or ESPN would be, is still a huge component and an important component of Major League Soccer. Because again, with this deal, they are going behind a wall, if you will. And the calculation is how many people are going to follow them and pay that subscription to go with them. And if and when that happens, are they out of sight, out of mind? Because when they are on Big Fox or on Big ESPN or ABC or something like that, there's a whole lot more people that have access and are able to come into that tent. And in this situation with just Apple, that kind of goes away. I'm sure that they've thought about this, and there are people that are much smarter than me that have thought about this, but it will be interesting ultimately when that linear part of the deal gets done, who it's with. Do you continue with Fox? Do you continue with ESPN? Do you continue with both Fox and ESPN? Do you continue with neither of them? I don't know. We have no inside information as to what it is. If this is the last year that we are doing broadcasts of Major League Soccer, I'd be sad. But there is plenty of soccer at Fox and plenty of wonderful soccer for us to talk about when it comes. And strategically, you will recognize what Fox has done, especially over the last couple of years, with big events, with tournaments, and really leaning into those types of that type of content going forward. But I still hold out hope that we will be, from a Fox perspective, still part of MLS. But if not, things change and everything has to end at a certain point. And who knows what happens in the future. But all in all, I think that this is a win for Major League Soccer. And I think that this is a win for Major League Soccer fans. The question will be how many new fans, or I guess in this case from a business perspective, how many new subscriptions and how many people continue on, and then how do you grow that given this relationship? I don't know, Mosse, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's always interesting. There are people that judge it the way things are now, and so they think it'd be strange to not have MLS games on ESPN or Fox, that they need to be easy to find. And then there are others that say, well, no, this is the way of the future. And I don't know exactly what the future looks like, so it's hard to gauge. But we'll just have to see where the industry goes and how common these deals become.
We also don't know what the price is going to be on this MLS, whatever we're calling it, this MLS app within an app, within the Apple app. And that's important, whatever what that price point is, especially in this day and age, Mosse, where remember we were talking about, I don't want to have cable because I don't want to have all these channels that I don't want. Well, we're just giving it a different name. And as a matter of fact, we're probably at some point going to be paying more than we were back in the day in order to, especially from soccer perspective, because we have to have all of these different things. But I love it. I'm never going to complain about the fact that there is more technical ability or technological ability for us to see soccer games when it comes to the United States than ever in history. And relative to most places around the world, we are incredibly lucky and fortunate, and people are jealous of the amount of soccer that we are able to put out on a continual basis.
A couple of quick MLS notes from the weekend. Seattle and LAFC played a great game, and Seattle finished 1-1. Rusnak and Arango, the goal scorers, had the feel of two teams that might run into each other down the road. LAFC obviously atop the Western Conference, and Seattle are now above the playoff line and trending in the right direction. And I no doubt will shoot up there and be one of the top seeds in the West as well. So these two teams might end up as the class of the West. NYCFC in their first game under their new manager, they drew Colorado 1-1. Thales Magno scored a great goal for NYCFC. But already some people, it wasn't that great of a performance. So some people wondered, losing Ronnie Dyla in the middle of the campaign, is that going to hurt?
That's a pain in the ass. That's
But they are right now in first place in the East. Philadelphia and the Red Bulls 1 point back. And then the one other game I want to mention, we covered actually a really fun game, Nashville SKC with a much needed win on the road, 2-1. That ended Nashville's 25 match home unbeaten run in all competitions. But the game I want to mention is New England rallied to beat Minnesota 2-1. Unbeaten in their last 8, 4 wins and 4 draws. They're now above the playoff line. So after a terrible start to the season and maybe being affected by CCL, Bruce Arena has them headed in the right direction. And this was billed as Matt Turner's farewell. He made a point of wanting to be there for this game. And yet Bruce Arena didn't play him, which everybody thought was a bit odd. So I don't know if that's just Bruce Arena, not like we're moving on, and so that,
yeah, probably. No, I mean, there was also probably a recognition of, I'm not going to risk it. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, this was the first after the international break, MLS back in full swing, the first full weekend. And so it was good to have
Let me ask you something. We're recording this on Monday, June 20th. As of now, Carlos Vela has yet to sign a new contract. And in a matter of days, that could change. But you're listening to it now. Maybe it's changed since we've recorded this. But it is a little strange, isn't it, Mosse?
It is a tad askew. Yeah, I mean, it's. I'm seeing a quote from him on the Major League Soccer website right now. Carlos Vela leaves door open for LAFC exit. Quote, "This is business." So I don't know. I mean, we had been led to believe this was done. Doug McIntyre reported it on our air that this was a done deal. So we might have to get Doug back on to clarify what's going on here.
But I mean, why the needless intrigue if it's done? I mean, it's stupid at this point. You're only making things worse. And if you're LAFC, aren't you going to him and saying, what are we doing here? Why are you being like this? I don't know. I mean, it's so strange that there's got to be something going on, something that they're not telling us. But who knows? And when we pick up MLS this fall, Carlos Vela might not be involved, and we know how huge of an influence he has been. He didn't start this weekend up in Seattle because of the turf situation. So they're still caring for his body as if he matters going forward. So I don't know. Strange times. We'll see what happens with Carlos Vela. There's another Twitter question though, right?
Yes. We'll end on this at Mastery Odaiv. Did I say that one correctly?
Not close. Yeah.
Luis, can it ever be like Steve Smith? I mean, is there anything you can do to convince U.S. Soccer to bring those 1994 USA denim jerseys back?
The denim. We've talked about this on the show before, but it bears repeating, especially, with all the nostalgia of this past week with the announcement of the venues for 2026. So here's the problem in its simplest form. That was back when Adidas was the apparel partner for the United States Soccer Federation and all of its teams. And that iconic faux denim jersey would and still belongs to Adidas. So any type of homage or throwback would have to come with an incredible amount of cooperation and a kumbaya moment between, two of the leading in the industry, in Adidas and Nike. And by the way, two of the heavyweights that are constantly going at it back and forth in the not just the soccer game, in the sports game out there. So I listen, I'm as romantic as you are, and I would love to see something like that. I'm not holding my breath, but you never know. I mean, Nike is incredibly creative, but I think it would have to take a lot of negotiation and understanding and a real type of kumbaya moment. And I think for both Adidas and Nike, they might be able to do something really interesting because, Nike isn't in the business of helping Adidas, and Adidas certainly is in the business of helping Nike. Or Nike, because they are creative, they go out and do something as or more iconic. Now, keep in mind, when those came out back in 1994, there were a lot of people that looked at them askew. There were a lot of people that said, this is just inviting the wrong kind of attention. They have since become, pretty much everybody's, not everybody's favorite, but a lot of people, whether they were there in 1994 or not, a lot of people recognize it, that they are iconic. They are as American as you can get, which is why I love them. And obviously I have a history with them, but I don't think there's anything that I can do, you can do, that's going to get this done. You can put pressure and, let your feelings be known, but I don't think it's going to happen, unfortunately. I could be proven wrong, and that would be wonderful. It would warm the cockles of my redheaded American faux denim heart when it comes to those jerseys. They still, when I see them, I sit up a little bit, and still puts a smile on my face when I see them. And they popped in on the TV screen. They popped on, on pictures, and you can't take your eyes off. So I don't know, Mosse, you think that could ever happen?
Bringing those uniforms back?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, the 2026 World Cup has made everybody sort of nostalgic about 94 and doing a lot of reminiscing about it. I mean, when you mentioned the Pontiac Silverdome earlier, my mind immediately went to Eric Ronaldo's free kick, US Switzerland. Brazil played their final group game there against Sweden, 1-1, where Mario scored a great goal. And I think in the spirit of a lot of sort of wanting to connect this to 94, and yeah, who knows, maybe. So
every year around this time, people will, send clips of this or that. And so we're in this moment where it was 28 years ago was the 1994 World Cup. And since we're obviously in June, these were when these games happened. And the game at the Silverdome that you mentioned with Eric Ronaldo scoring, and the OJ Bronco chase the night before, and an 11:30 a.m. kickoff in this Pontiac Silverdome that is no more, but it had grass inside, and it was so friggin' hot and humid because, there's grass inside of this bubble. Basically, it was one of those terrariums, or not terrarium, whatever. It was really, really hot. I can't think of the word, those hot houses or whatever. And it was very, very uncomfortable. I do remember squishing in my shoes while I was running on the Pontiac Silverdome grass, which kudos, by the way, to Greenhouse. There you go. That's what it's called. Kudos to Michigan State, who did the tray system, is what they called it. And it was wonderful. It was incredible to play on it. You didn't miss a beat. They seamed together, and it should be even better given the fact that it's going to be 30 years later, when it comes, more than 30 years later from 1994. So anyway.
One of my top 5 favorite 30 for 30 documentaries is the June 17th, 1994, where they chronicle all the different things going on that day. That was the OJ Bronco chase. That was the opening day of the World Cup. You had, I think it was Arnold Palmer playing his final round in the US Open golf tournament. You had the Rangers Stanley Cup parade, the Knicks playing the Rockets in the NBA Finals, Ken Griffey Jr. hitting 3 home runs in a game. It's just like this epic day where just so much crazy stuff happens. And yeah, they did a really good job sort of capturing that in that documentary. So the 2 Escobars is still my number 1 on any 30 for 30 list, but June 17th, 1994 is very high up.
That's awesome. That is, yeah, I love it too. And you don't realize in the moment when, I'm sitting next to Brad Friedel, because I was originally Eric Ronaldo's roommate, but he went and drank a sports drink, and he had an allergic reaction, so they had to move him out of my room. And so the night before our game against Switzerland in the Pontiac Silverdome, I'm sitting there in bed with, not together, but next, we have 2 beds in the room, and we're watching the OJ chase. And I remember turning and going, OJ's going to screw this all up, because we got to be up early because it was a morning kickoff, to the point that we were talking about the other day, in order to make it more appealing to a European audience. All right. Thank you to everybody that sent these Twitter questions in. Keep them coming, whether it's using the hashtag Ask Alexi or sending us calls. It's 657-549-2297, 657-549-2297. That is the State of the Union podcast hotline. But thanks to everybody this week for sending in those questions. Anything else, Mosse?
That's it.
All right, we're coming to the end of the show, and right around the corner after this break, I'll give him my one for the road. All right, welcome back, and welcome to the end of the show. And at the end of each show, I give you my one for the road. And I mentioned at the top of the show that I am in Zurich, Switzerland here, continuing my education. It's called the Next 90, and it's a program through FIFA. As I said, about 35 ex-players, and it's predominantly geared towards players that are just have finished their career. Obviously, they're looking for the next 90. They're looking for that next step in their life, really, and certainly in their career. And what they know, they've been very good at, but now they're coming into a world that for a lot of them is foreign, and for a lot of them can be very, very scary. Now, I'm very, very old, and I'm well on that pathway. And there's a lot of people in between that have, kind of tried to figure some things out. But it's been really fun, especially with some of the younger, recently retired, I guess it would be, athletes, to hear the way that they think about life, to hear the way that they think about soccer. And I wanted to do it as much to learn about how they see things, as getting stuff, to help me. So it's been, as I said, fun to hear their stories, because they're going through things that I went through a long time ago. And, it happens fast. And oftentimes it happens in a way that you are not prepared. It never happens in that perfect way, riding off into the sunset. And when it does stop, it is a door slamming, and everything that you have done, oftentimes for 30 plus years, maybe less than that, obviously, unless you started when you were really, really young, but at least 20 years is just done. And everything that and a lot of your identity is wrapped up in that sport, and it goes away like that. And the rest of the world continues on. And it can be daunting, and it can be scary. And look, this isn't a cry for pity for any of these players. It's just the recognition that they are in a place that a lot of people will not ever necessarily be, where they are starting over, but they are starting over oftentimes without any of the tools that you may have amassed through life. And so this is an attempt to immerse all of them, including myself, in business, and to talk about everything from the language of business to the history of business, to current business and the evolution and what is changing and what's going forward, and really trying to think about putting yourself in positions to succeed in something, and recognizing that while that door has closed, you are still bringing with it some skills, and maybe some unique skills, maybe not the traditional ones that others have that you're going to have to make up quickly, but some other, possibilities and other valuable types of lessons and skill sets, like I told you about, that can come from a career, and being able to identify those and bring them out and use them to your advantage. And whether it's, the leadership that you have, or, the strength, or whether it's the work ethic that you have, or whether it's the connections that you have, whether it's the international aspect of playing, all of those different things actually can help you going forward. But you got to have, you got to be able to harness them. You have to be able to recognize them. And that is a lot of what this program is. Today we went over to the actual FIFA campus, and it, as you can expect, is incredible. The architecture is incredible. The people are incredible, and there's soccer fields all over the place, and there's food, and there's a wonderful auditorium, and they're treating us incredibly, incredibly well. But it's fun to see this mythical type of place. I was here many, many, many years ago, I think. But it's fun actually to go on campus and to have these meetings every single day, and these classes every single day with these folks. So, as I said, it's a year-long program. It's not going to change my life forever, but I do see the value in it, even for me at 52 years old, and pretty much the oldest person in the group. But I think it's already been worth it. There's 2 times that we have to go on site, and so this is one of the times that we have to go on site. It's it's a privilege and it's an honor, and we're already having a really good time. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go meet some of my classmates, I guess you would call them, downstairs at the bar for a nightcap before we head off into our second day of classes. I'll be back stateside next week, but I still might be on the road. So, Mosse, anything?
And very quickly, has anybody in Zurich mentioned the pod? You say whenever you're on the road, you get comments about it. Have we international?
Buddy, nobody has yet to come up to me and talk about you yet. But I'm still early days. I just got here. I haven't really been out on the town yet when it comes to Zurich. But I guarantee that there are some State of the Union listeners that are from Zurich. If you're listening right now, make yourself known. All right, come over and say hello, and we'll celebrate what is the greatest soccer podcast on the planet. Want to see anything before we go?
That's it.
All right, listen. Thank you for writing in, whether it's your Twitter questions or the hotline or anything else. Thank you for downloading. Thank you for being fans of this show now for a bunch of years. Thank you for reviewing and rating and subscribing and doing all the different things that you do out there. It's a labor of love, my friends. We will be here same time, not same place, but same time next week, and we'll get that show off. There'll be much more MLS action. I got to get out of here at the end of the week, get back for some MLS action on the weekend and U.S. women's national team action on the weekend. So I'm excited about that. And then we head into the summer. And before we know it, World Cup 2022 in Qatar is going to be here. And by the way, before we know it, World Cup 2026 is going to be here. And as I said before, these are wonderful things to look forward to. And again, they will change the face of soccer in the United States and Canada and Mexico for that matter. And I cannot wait to harness that energy and see that power play out when in 2026. All right. Until then, and as always, size the day.
You like that clip? Well, my State of the Union podcast drops every week. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.